This piece is called Chapters, and it references the story of Marie Byles. Marie Byles was born in 1900 and died in 1979. She was the first female lawyer in New South Wales, which was quite a feat back in the 1920s. She grew up climbing mountains with her family. She lived in Beecroft and Cheltenham. She went to school in Ladies College on the North Shore. She purchased some land just across the road from where I grew up, which is what I guess sparked my interest, although I never knew her. She climbed most of the mountain peaks, large mountain peaks around the world. She travelled by cargo boat, so she was quite an adventurer in the 1930s. She wrote books about her travels. She travelled quite extensively around India and Thailand and Burma. She became interested in the Quaker movement and Buddhism, and she wrote several books about Buddhism. She was quite an extraordinary environmentalist. Her brother was responsible for founding the Snowy Mountains National Park, and she was responsible for founding the Beaudesert National Park, which is on the opposite bank of Pittwater, just near Kilcare. She was a very successful lawyer. She only employed women in her law practice, and she was instrumental in getting rights for women to get custody of their children. Prior to that, the custody of children in a divorce would go automatically to the man. So she was quite instrumental in making quite fundamental changes to that system. She called herself a natural celibate. Today, perhaps with a bit more sexual freedom, perhaps she wouldn't have labelled herself thus and had better expression. But in those days, of course, you were expected to get married and become a housewife, and she didn't want to do that. She was quite independent. She was quite a bolshy woman. She's often described as being difficult. She was very petite, very little. I think people overlooked her often, but I think she actually, as soon as she had a very sharp mind. She trekked through the Himalayas, through Asia, through India. She wrote articles for local newspapers and international newspapers. She wrote several books. And when she died, she left her property to the National Trust, so it's in trust for all of us to enjoy. And she called her property Ahimsa, which means do no harm. And a bit of a story, but when she was in her late 60s, she had this hut that she had created that was inspired by the work of Walter Burley Griffin, who is the architect who designed Canberra. So quite simplistic and very connected to the environment. So she built this small couple of bungalows, very small. She was very modest, even though she had a very successful legal practice. And she would often sleep on the veranda. So she was sleeping on the veranda one evening, and a disgruntled client came and bashed her. It's unknown whether she was actually raped as well. And she was found unconscious, locked in a cupboard. And so that preceded her. She survived another 10 years after that. But she chose never to press charges because she really firmly believed in do no harm, even to those who have harmed you. I think that's an incredible show of stoicism and courage, and she really held on to her beliefs. I think that's a really fascinating thing, and a woman who's done all these amazing things that most people have never heard of. So I was fortunate enough to stay at Ahimsa last year as part of a residency program and worked in the Mitchell Library taking photographs from the archive as well as photographs on site in this beautiful bushland setting. And each of those photographs I've printed in this installation onto Japanese handmade paper. And then I've printed some of her writings and I've sandwiched those together and stitched them together. And then they're encased in perspex and hung in the installation with the idea that, yes, you see the photograph, yes, you see the text on the other side, yes, you see the stitching, but you also, when it's held up to the light, you can see the light coming through. And so there are layers of meaning to these works. I think her legacy is quite extraordinary, and yet she is relatively unknown. And I hope this work sparks conversation about the role of women in environmentalism, in the law, and the role of meditation.